morning. The published special call meeting has been canceled, and we'll reschedule that at another time. So we're about to start the study session for May 10th, 2022. Before we do, I'm going to stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Anyone who would like to join me, please feel free to do so. All right, looks like first item on the agenda.
It's budget time, so appreciate you guys doing this. We've typically handled it this way and then carry it over to the county for consideration by the county commission. So I think, do we have the PowerPoints already handed out? Everybody has a PowerPoint, copy of the PowerPoint, okay. And then you have a budget book. We typically always give you that. And we'll also make all of this available online as soon as the meeting's over, so the public will have access to it, and we do that every year as well. So a little bit, our format has stayed pretty consistent year over year for quite some time, and we try to do that to create some consistency when you're looking at the budget. Obviously go through our revenue and expenditure changes, which is what most people are concerned about, obviously, when you're building the budget, and then take questions from you about any of the items. Obviously, if you have any questions, just like in the previous years, please reach out to me. You guys know how involved I am with Ms. Brown and the budget, so just reach out to me and I'll be glad to answer any questions or get you an answer before we vote on the budget, which is scheduled for next week, next Tuesday. So same cycle that we've been on in the past number of years. All right, our mission, Sumner County Schools commits to growing learners who are college and career ready through quality instruction, effective use of resources, building a collaborative culture, and strong leadership. I think we're doing a really good job of that. I know Scott and I were talking today. We just had the announcements of the latest designated STEM and STEAM schools in the state of Tennessee. I don't know if you noticed that or not, but we had some additional ones. We are up to 11 now. I think there's 88 in the state of Tennessee, and 11 of them are in Sumner County. And then we also have more certified pathways. We're up to 30 now, so we're #1 in the state of Tennessee for career and technical ed pathways too. So I think we're doing a really good job sticking with what our mission is. Every year we've had these same kind of overarching budget goals. Increase efficiency and effectiveness within the system, expand opportunities for students, and then drive as many resources as possible to the classroom. We've done that over time, either through staffing or through resources like purchasing supplies, technology, other things that we've been able to put into each classroom across the county. We start this every year in early February with principals budget meetings with principals at each school, which obviously we have every one of them come through. We have a format that we use that's been consistent for years, and so it's a pretty methodical process that we use that principals understand and know kind of what's coming every year, so they can kind of understand what's going to happen. Then we move to department heads and cabinet level, and then obviously we get to May, and that's when we present to you guys, and then hopefully take it over and get it approved at the county. All right, budget summary, and we always try to cover revenue first. Local funding, and this is based on what Mr. Lawing is giving us, which is what we do every year. Local funding increase this coming year, a little over 13, almost 14 million. That in past years, it's kind of been up and down depending. Back when we did the January of 20 pay change for certified staff across the system. It was higher that year. A lot of that obviously depends on the flow of property tax and sales tax, especially was going to be impacted through the pandemic, if you remember. And we pretty much were very conservative, and I think that was the right move for us across the county to be conservative on our revenue estimate from last year going into this budget cycle. Fortunately for us, I think for the county as well, you know, our monthly sales tax receipts have been strong. There really never was a dip. And some months even much stronger than we were even predicting previous years. So with all of that said, I think you see a little combination of some typical yearly growth that would have occurred, and then we had a kind of a flatline budget last year because we weren't sure the impact of sales tax. So you're kind of catching both of those things as you go into this upcoming year. State funding, this is a little bit larger. Our typical state budget at BEP increase is around $4.5 million. It's been higher in years where they've allocated more money to teacher pay raises in BEP. They did that this year. And then some years we've had it where it was very little, you know, pretty much the same as the previous year. But on average, it's around $4.5 million per year. So we had a combination of local and state funding higher than what we have seen in previous years as an average. So we have a little over almost $23 million in new revenue that we're recognizing for the upcoming budget cycle. We always do this. It's got a lot of numbers. It's somewhat complicated.
Mr. Chairman Brew, can I ask a question real quick? I know you're kind of just getting started. On this slide right here where you talk about the state funding for BEP increase, and I know we'll talk about teacher salaries and pay increases as we get further along, but just to clarify, when the state gives funding increase for BEP for teachers, they're not saying you have X number of employees and we're giving you X amount of dollars for every one of those employees. They're saying here's a pool of...
Look at BEP and how BEP currently is structured. They're really only covering about 60% of the staffing that we consider certified. So BEP, you know, is a basic education program. So we, you know, at the end of the day, they've never, I guess the way it's structured, intended to pay for 100% of the certified staff, even though they have mandates that say, well, you have to comply with PTR, you have to comply with other requirements by law, but we're not going to give you all the funding for that. I think it'll change a little bit in TISA if that goes through and it comes to fruition. But you're right, in the BEP, the increase that they give wouldn't equate to covering all of the certified staff because that's not the way it's calculated. And then it wouldn't cover any of the classified staff. So you wind up with a big discrepancy, and we've talked about that year over year over year. You know, I think the governors sometimes in the State of the State address talk about percentages of pay increase, but that's not really actual because the funds that they send will only cover that percentage increase for 60% of the certified staff in reality. So that's kind of how that works. If you look, this is kind of a complicated sheet that we try to make it as simple as possible every year, but we have a mandatory amount that we have to remain in fund balance. That goes up every year as your budget expenditure operation minus capital plus daycare funds are placed into those mandatory restricted accounts that you can't spend. Then we have the assigned amount. Last year, we've been trying to work that number up over the past 4 or 5 years, but I think 3 years ago we said $6 million, if I think that's right, and then we went to 15, and this year we're trying to move that to 27. And that looks like a big number, but when you look in a minute at what adjustments to pay over time, the impact that has, it can eat away at that really quickly. So you know, you just have to kind of look at it in the window of money that you have, but that in the future it could go away pretty quickly in our size organization. So projected undesignated fund balance a little over 40, right under 44 million. Total budgeted revenue 298. Budget expenditure about 323. So 25 million, 26 million budgeted revenue less expenditures. We did add capital expenditures this year. I think in the past we've moved that number up as we funded things out in the schools, like the athletic dollars that go out. So we've kind of tried to make a way in our budget to handle some of the things principals ask for on campuses, and some of those we've had success partnering with booster clubs and others to do projects across every campus in the county over the past 4 or 5 years, and I think that's been a good thing, and we hope to continue that. One of the things that we're looking at on capital expenditures, we're in the process of bidding, obviously, the middle school and White House Intermediate, and I mentioned over at a county meeting yesterday that it's a difficult environment to bid construction projects. Timelines are pretty fast, and they move quite rapidly. Subs and guaranteeing materials and pricing and all that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit different environment. It's competitive, obviously, but we need to think through as we move in the next 2 budget cycles some of the expenses that we're going to have as we open those schools. So as we open Liberty Creek Middle and White House Intermediate, hopefully both of those will get done. We're going to have funds set aside for FF&E, furniture, fixtures, equipment, technology, low voltage, the things that in the past, most of the last 4 or 5 years, we've had those dollars allocated in the bond from the county, right? With the cost increases in construction, we believe all of those bond proceeds will probably go straight to construction. Does that make sense? So we're going to have to, as a school board, make sure that we plan well enough that we can buy furniture and technology and things that are needed when those schools get open. So we're trying to set that money aside now to plan for when that occurs. And like I said, it will occur. And then we just have the fund balance that we've tried to maintain, that we just don't budget into any line. And that's that $3 million mark that's down there. This is the one that we talk about the most. I can kind of boil down to, this year in a couple of things, and then it's going to get, minus the capital, it really boils down to 2 things. Pay, we've tried to put a substantial, more than we've ever put in any single year since I've been here, more pay into the pocket of our employees. And I'm going to show you how we've proposed to do that. And then Liberty Creek staffing. And of course, years ago, we knew that the day was coming when we'd have recurring expenses to staff that building, right? And so really, you boil down this budget, the biggest portion revolves around those 2 things: employee pay and staff in Liberty Creek. That's where most of the expenses boil down to. So we'll take the first one, and let me explain that pay increase number, because it deals with not only certified but also classified, so we can try to spread it across all of our employees within the school district. So almost about $18.5 million. So when you look at adjusting pay, especially if you adjust it in a large way, obviously with as many employees as we have, it's going to cost you a considerable amount of money, and I think that's money that's well deserved and that we should do, and that's why we're proposing it. If you look, this is kind of what I'm proposing. Back in the fall of 19, we made a move with our teacher pay to get it, the starting pay above $40,000. Y'all remember that? Okay, we started that January of 20, and we generated a recurring revenue stream to make sure that would be sustainable, obviously. So what we're asking to do in this budget, and a big portion of that $18 million, is to go ahead and move the needle again. Okay, And so we're going to add 4,000 again, plus the step for teachers, for certified staff. So how that looks, I'm going to pass this around. Sam, will you pass those around? Do you remember this sheet? All of you? It kind of shows who we compete with as far as teacher pay. And it will give you a good idea of where we're at, 0 to year 25, in comparison to Williamson, Wilson, and Robertson County. Now, this is the latest information that we have from those neighboring counties. They could change theirs in this year's budget cycle at their own, at their county meetings, but this is what we have currently to go with. So if you look, you know, that puts us obviously in a very good spot. It would make our teacher pay across the board more than Williamson County until you get master's degree in 16 or 17 years, and I think we're pretty much dead even. I think it would put us in front of all the others by a considerable amount. I think the only one today that I could say would be higher in teacher pay would be Rutherford County by just a little bit, maybe a couple $100, I think, and Metro maybe, I can't remember, maybe $1,000 or something like that after this. But of course they could go through some pay changes with their budget as well. But this is good information, good data to have. I know we shared this back in the fall of 19, and it's good. It's good to kind of look at, to know where you're at from a recruiting standpoint, a retention standpoint, and certainly trying to put yourself out there where you're valuing your teachers and you're putting dollars out there to honor the ones that are here, that have been here, but also make sure as we're in the job market, we get the best and brightest. And so I'm excited and happy about that. And I think we can say that we have been able to move the needle on teacher pay more in the past 3 years probably than anyone. Certainly I know locally, but anyone probably in Middle Tennessee. Classified raises, and we always talk about how in the past we've tried to move classified pay. I can remember just 5 or 6 years ago, the percentage of employees in classified or classified employees that were at $8 or less. You remember that? It was a mind-boggling number. And we put dollars in, even though we did pay adjustments 2 times, we put dollars in to raise the starting pay to $10. Do y'all remember that? And we were happy about that at that time. So we've continued to move the bar up, which is deserved and needed, much needed. But we've tried to look at what can we do for classified, how to make that look and feel equal to everyone, similar to how we do the certified raises. So what this boils down to is we're saying for classified, all classified employees would be $1 an hour raise across the board. So even if you're someone that's been here 18 years, right, that dollar feels the same to you as it does to someone that's just been here 1 year. So the raise impacts the same across the scale. And then they'll also get the 2% step increase. So how that equates to for someone that works, you know, a job here on an annual basis that's not a 12-month employee in the classified world, you know, it's going to be about a $2,400 raise, something like that, depending on where they're at on the scale. So it's obviously across the board much more than we've done in the past. We've had individual jobs that have been impacted because we've done pay increases in different cycles. So in the past we have done similar or had similar proposals that were implemented. This is the first time it's just been across for everyone. Does that make sense? And not in a cycle.
Mr. Daniels?
Yeah, I've just got a quick question. So looking at the salary comparison you gave us, we've got the 1920 year, we've got the current year, then we've got the proposed, then we've got Williamson, Wilson, Robertson, kind of comparing their salaries ranges. I just want to clarify, you'd mentioned that those salary ranges are for the current year based on what they're currently currently paying their employees, correct? And I'm asking that because we just mentioned on the BEP that the BEP increase came from the state, which led to more dollars going towards teacher salary as well. And so I would anticipate, based on what you're saying, that even though we've got these numbers right here for Williamson, Wilson, and Robertson, those numbers will go up when they get to their teacher salary structure because there's additional dollars from the state that's going into that plan. Would that be?
Yes, that would be accurate. But just like we do every year in the past, how they allocate that money could look very different across
Correct.
the school districts.
Correct.
So
Yeah, and I just, and the reason I was asking is if you're just looking at these numbers versus proposed, it looks like a pretty big jump and a pretty big gap between some of these. But as they start allocating those monies, that gap is going to close maybe significantly in some cases.
yeah, it very well could, and you know, we don't have visibility on what they're going to do. I mean, you know, we can talk to them and see, but they're all in the same process we are. So I think when you look at you know, our neighboring counties, they could raise their starting pay, and I anticipate that they will. But if you look at Wilson County pays pretty much a flat scale regardless of what degree you have, and then they pay a lot on the front end, but then it doesn't step up much each year. But then Williamson, I think we're most aligned probably with how Williamson does it, and I think that would continue. But certainly us moving our needle 4,000 more, certainly going to put some pressure, I think, on other neighboring folks to do the same.
All right, thank you.
If you look down, we've talked about substitute pay before. And I'll get to you. Substitute pay before, and we made a decision a number of years ago, which worked well, to try to get some of our retirees back in the system. And so we set it up at that point saying, hey, if you were a Sumner County school retiree, we were going to pay you more. And we attracted a number, especially from the school they retired from. You know, they'd come back, they knew everyone. And I think that's worked out really well for us. We had a bigger shift to degree, and we have more people that sub with a degree, but we know that the non-degree that are out there that are subbing for us and have been consistently subbing for us, that $51 a day is not reasonable to do it anymore. So we've looked at trying to figure out how to make that kind of fair, move all of them up. So if you see, we have current and then proposed. So the non-degree, we got to 75, degree to 100, and then our retirees to 125. I think that feels good. You know, it's acknowledging that they need to move up in pay across the board. It makes us a little bit more competitive. And, you know, if you're subbing, like I said, obviously you're connected to that school for the most part, and either a parent or someone that wants to be there and is willing to sub. And so obviously we're happy that we're able to hopefully move that up. Ms. Brown had a question. Do you have a question about sub pay or?
Well, yeah, I do about subway. But before that, are we having trouble getting teachers?
So let me answer that probably the best way I can. We have a very strong pool of applicants in the county. I will say that not only us, but every school district, Williamson, Wilson, we don't have nearly the applicants we used to have. But I don't think that's a function of us being competitive in pay or benefits. I think that's a function of the labor market. There's just not as many teachers out there graduating from college, looking for a job, they've taken a job in another profession. Could be a number of things. But I don't attribute it to a unique situation for us. I certainly think the thing like being on the front end of pay certainly helps us have a good applicant pool.
Well, I want to know why the certified should get more than a degree teacher.
On sub pay? They don't. If you're a certified teacher, whether you're with us or not, you get more pay as a sub.
I don't get it. Or am I missing it?
Yeah, so I guess maybe ask me your question again so I understand it exactly.
Well, here it says the certified proposed 125 degree teachers.
A college degree, but they're not a certified teacher, meaning they don't have,
Okay, I got you.
yeah, they don't have a current
I got
certified, yeah. yeah.
I couldn't.
And then bus driver pay, okay, Mr. Gregory? Yes, sir.
You mentioned about the shortage or lack of teachers compared to a few years ago. How many show up at job fairs?
On the time, Mr. Ott in the HR department, you know, that done a tremendous job. We had one Station Camp High School not long ago. It was a beautiful Saturday. Probably didn't contribute to a lot of folks wanting to be out at a job fair, but all of our principals were there. We were there, and wound up having a good crowd come through lunchtime and after. But you know, job fairs are more effective when we go with a group of principals to a university and they have a job fair, because the students and graduates are all kind of there anyway.
I've
So
always thought that was
yeah, we send principals and HR staff to almost every job fair. Some of them have a job fair in December for December graduates, and some don't. It just kind of depends on the university. Yeah, but we attend all of those things. Sure do. Along with other counties that are neighboring to us that go.
Well, it's competitive.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
very
it's competitive. Yeah.
Because I've been to them. And some counties, boy, I tell you what, they do a great job of PR.
Yeah.
It's not just walking and it's a PR session.
Yep. Our group does a great job. We have a lot of
I'm
success
sure we
out
do.
of our
I'm not
job
saying
fair.
we don't, but
yeah, yeah. The next thing is bus driver pay. Obviously, you guys know kind of the world we've been in, even pre-pandemic, with bus drivers. At the end of the day, it's just for us, it's probably a combination of pay, but it's also always about hours. You know, you have to have someone that those hours are unique to fit what they can do during the day. And so we're looking at bus driver pay. Andrew and the state did, through the transportation world, did kind of a survey around to see, similar systems, similar ridership, pay, just use some data that we could kind of analyze where we were at, what do we need to do, what would put us in the best position to try to not have 50 driver openings when we get to this time of the year. Probably one of the larger pay increases, obviously per hour, deals with bus drivers. So you're talking about an average increase for bus drivers about $7 an hour. That's pretty substantial, especially when the starting pay was $12.12. Most of our peer group counties were somewhere, if they also had benefits, it was somewhere between $15 and $18, somewhere in that range. So if we do the $7 an hour, that kind of puts us right at the top end of most of our peer group with the scale. And hopefully for that, we will be able to attract more drivers that will come in and be with us. And just like any time that we do pay increases, we talk about those that we're recruiting and onboarding, but it's also good for all those folks that are here driving, right, that have been driving. We were over with Andrew at the Bus Driver of the Year award ceremony, and to talk to the bus drivers that have been driving buses in Sumner County for 38, 39 years. What, Ms. Manny, 43? Yeah, 43 years on a Westmoreland route. So it rewards those folks just like it does folks that we're just recruiting to the job. So feel good about that, and hopefully that'll be well received. This is a slide that we've had for years, and it's because we try to keep up over time and have a visual for all of the budgets and the changes in salary and salaries for certified and classified over time. And you see from 1920 that we obviously have become more aggressive in pay, whether that's the 2% step or now we're doing 2% plus the hour increase, dollar an hour increase for classified, and then the step plus 4,000 twice in 1920 in the split, and then 22, 23 if this budget gets approved. Mr. Brewer.
Mr. Daniels?
Yeah, quick question. I just, again, for clarification, looking at the raises, all classified employees, $1 an hour plus step increase, substitute pay, we've got the chart, and then bus driver has a pay increase that makes a pretty good jump from starting pay to recommended pay. So when we're looking at this, and just when we talk about classified, we're talking about maintenance staff, folks in the office, folks in the library, and everybody that works in our school that doesn't have a certification for the most part.
That's right.
And so what we're saying is that every one of those individuals, when they're looking at this, they're all going up $1 plus a 2% increase in step.
That's right.
And then it's a bus driver. I remember over the years back, 4, 5, 6 years ago when we did the budget, we kind of focused on one group and gave them that cost of living increase as economic conditions change across the country. And so that's kind of similar to what we're doing with the bus drivers right here.
Yeah, I think it's more, what we did back then, we did it in 2 cycles actually, from 2013, 14 forward. And we did 2 cycles where we caught every classified job classification, if you remember. And we would move them about 4 ranges up, which was about 16% or so. And so when we did that in 2 cycles to catch everyone. And we kind of did that based on, number one, we had so many making less than $8 an hour at that time. And plus we were so far skewed away from the private market. That was even before the labor market got tough. So, yes, I would say that the dollar an hour is to adjust a little bit to the market. I would say that this one is absolutely to adjust to the market because, now if you go out and you look at any type of CDL qualified driving job, it's astronomical in terms of what it used to be a few years ago, what the pay is. Right. So, and hours obviously is a unique situation because of the hours and what they're transporting every day. But at the end of the day, we need to try to find the balance there to reward the folks that we have that are doing a great job, but also try to fill enough positions that we don't have that deficit of 50. Which makes it very, very difficult.
And like the main reason I'm asking, because when I first looked at this, I saw the all classified, but then we spent a lot of time on substitutes and bus drivers. And then I look back up, I'm like, oh, that includes everybody else. And so I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that we're talking about all those other employees that would get the $1 an hour plus a step increase.
Yeah, so we're planning this. We're planning these two. We're planning for everyone in the system to be impacted by these raises.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Ms. Andrews?
Yeah, I just have a couple questions. On the classified employees, with that dollar and the step, and Ms. Pritchard may need to answer this for me. So I know we were looking at like $10 an hour, I think at one point. Yeah, no, like full-time employee, what is the minimum classified?
I think it's $10.12 in there or something like that.
That's it, with this dollar included, or it will now be?
No, this will be in addition to that.
Yeah.
So it'll be $11 would be would be roughly.
Exactly, but very close.
Okay, and then also with the substitute pay, I'm not saying anything that you don't already know. This is a long time coming. I know that you and I actually sat down, I feel like it was March of 2020, and prior to us even knowing about COVID, and as the budget was coming up and said, we've got to look at sub pay. Like, we know this is something that's happening, and then COVID hit. And at that point, it became we need to maintain employment and see what was going to happen with the market and with revenue, and because there were lots of question marks over the last 2 years of unknowns and how this is going to play out and so forth. And so it's been really great. We've almost completed a school year and everybody in the building. Like, I feel like we have really made those gains and realized, okay, we are going to weather this. We are good. And so to now be able to look at this and for these employees, I think this is huge.
Yeah.
Specifically for those non-degreed. You know, they have,
Yep.
they are the unsung heroes, I feel like, to a degree, of the last couple of years of, you know, still coming in, knowing what that pay is. And so I think just to honor them and say, hey, we appreciate what you do. We see you, and we do want to compensate you for that, I do think is a big deal. And I think they will be pleased to see that. So I'm very happy to be able to share that. When it comes to bus driver pay, so when it comes to pay, there's also more than just benefits. Do we pay for their certification for their CDL, or is that something that they?
I think it's a reimbursement.
They don't get paid to train, but we do provide employment hours for them. They ride on the buses and learn what the environment's like, so they get paid while they're on the buses with students. During training, not driving, but on the buses and things like that.
Okay, so then they pay for their own license at that point when they.
No, we pay for the CDL license.
That's what
They don't get paid during training.
Right, but we take care of that cost to them of when they get their CDL license, and then I assume when they have to pay to get that.
You know, on the record, I want to make sure they may take care of that themselves. They may not get that reimbursement. We can check with the office. We can.
Okay. I don't know that that's something we can do this year and so forth. I mean, I know that obviously this is a huge bump up for them. But I think sometimes, you know, even recognizing those small details and saying, hey, you know, and sometimes that's if, you know, especially with new employment is, hey, you know, you pay for it on the front end, and then when you've worked with us for X amount of months or the full year, then we reimburse that cost back to you.
They have to get a physical every year. We pay for those.
Right. So, you know, I think that that's something to consider as well within the benefits package with them, because I know my husband has a CDL. That's something that his company does provide for him, and that's, you know, huge. And I mean, and that's in addition to the precious cargo that they carry. There's other stipulations with that CDL license that the average citizen, you know, with our license, you know, if we get pulled over, for us with just a regular license, it's not as big of a deal as those people. So it's not just what they're doing during those limited hours. It's also the extended and the effects that could have on their license. So I think that would also be something that would be a good consideration for the future of us looking into just providing an extra benefit that long term is maybe not as costly, but it's still an appreciation.
Sarah, I checked, it was $10.
Correct. With this?
No, before this.
So
It'll be $11.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Andrews. Back to you, Dr. Felton.
All right. Let's see. Okay, so the next two slides here, Liberty Creek staffing. And so when you look at Liberty Creek staffing, you know, we, for a couple of years, obviously, been planning for the day when we were going to staff the school. And all of you know this because we've discussed it and we've gone through this before when we've opened Burris. And, you know, we have some jobs where when student populations move, obviously we'll move teachers to move with those students. But then there are some positions where you can't really do that. Obviously, where you just have one in a school, like a bookkeeper or a secretary, you can't take the one they have. So when you look at how that works, and we did that last fall with all of the principals, and it's worked great. We had about 160 total staff at Liberty Creek, but we had 102 that are represented in this number, and then about 52 that were moved between open jobs in the system. So out of the 160, you wound up having a net around 102, and that's kind of what we were expecting to happen. It's a little easier when you do that, and I think I even talked about this before with you guys. It's a little easier to do that in the elementary school, a little bit more difficult in the middle school. It's extremely hard in the high school, right? Because of just the way the classes are set, and you either have 23 or you have 18, but you still need to offer that history or English class, and it's just a little bit more difficult to split it up that way. So a lot of the new ads are always going to be more tilted toward the high school side, just because of the way it kind of breaks out. Teachers and staff and additional staffing adjustments, I kind of want to walk through this. Nursing, look at that at the bottom. Nurses and AEDs now in every school. every school building. And if you look at that chart and where we've come from since 2014-15, you'll see the incredible improvements that we've made. And you guys have heard me brag on Ms. Heron and her staff. Obviously, we were marching our way pre-pandemic to having a nurse in every school building, but we weren't quite there. Obviously, they did a tremendous job helping us keep school open during the pandemic. But now we finally, for those of us that have been around since 2014-15, and we were trying to figure out how to ever get to a nurse in every school building, and now we've been able, hopefully, if this budget gets approved, to do that. And certainly proud of that. Mr. Chairman, some questions? Sorry, who was first?
I'll be short.
Okay.
Fellow board members, of any number we talk about tonight, this one's the most important. We've had recent events that's happened in our school district.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkerson. Ms. Andrews.
Yeah, on the AEDs, I know we have one in every school. I did see a comment recently that made me wonder. On our schools that have multiple floors, do we have one on each floor?
Yes, and we're actually auditing the campuses right now to see if there's any additional needs, but yes.
Okay, because I know especially on those larger campuses, you know, and especially even thinking about Liberty Creek, where we do have kind of the middle school that's going to be in one section and then the high school in another section, making
And
sure.
one in the gym
Yeah.
area, yeah. Because the distance is so far.
Right.
It's just too hard to get to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
AEDs are dear to my heart, so I just want to
Yeah.
make sure, we can't have too many.
All right.
Thank you, Ms.
Look, this is a, let me see where we're at here. Yeah, this is a list, and I always try to give you the staffing list. And so this is a list that basically shows all of the staffing additions, and this does include that that number at Liberty Creek. Okay, so when you look at this, it looks like compared to previous years a lot, but it is a lot because we're opening a new campus, and we've been planning and prepping for this for quite some time. I will mention a couple of them that I think you probably will want to know about. 8 ELL teachers. The state in the past, so this is not the first time, has changed the actual number of students that each teacher can work with. And so it's just a mandated state requirement. So we're having to add ELL teachers because they continue to reduce that number. We did that probably, Scott, 4 or 5 years ago? It went down and we had to add some EL teachers. CT teachers, related arts, those are Liberty Creek where we are hiring those. 4 leads, Liberty Creek, Millersville, 1 principal, obviously Liberty Creek, 3 assistants, actually 4, but we had 1 that was transitioning. The 8 guidance counselors, I think that's showing. You know, some of those were Liberty Creek, but some of them were ratios that we run and try to allocate equally across the system. So 4 of them were Liberty Creek, but the other 4 were where we either had split jobs before where they were traveling between buildings and populations grown enough, we stopped that split and gave them a whole person. Does that make sense? Across the system. You know, that happened at Portland High School, Gallatin High School, Venus Stewart, Benny Bills, Madison Creek, Burris, and H.B. Williams. So it was a function of us increasing the guidance counselor time that they have there. You know, same thing with librarians, Liberty Creek, but we also had R.T. Fisher, who's going to have a librarian that we haven't had in the past. It's been a request. I think that's good. And then similar to the guidance counselors I mentioned, Oakmont goes from a half to a full-time. And so that's a good thing for Bryant and that group. As you look on through there, I've talked about nurses, social workers, one of those with Katie and 2 Norma. Speech language, the caseload, especially after the pandemic, we're just seeing more kiddos that need services that didn't have services during the pandemic, so they're showing up in kindergarten, 1st grade, and they need a little bit more intensive speech language help. Same thing with school psychologists, and then you go on down, and we added 1 attendance officer in Melanie's office down here because you know, they do a great job in keeping up with all of our kiddos and helping families, Keisha and the whole group. So we're adding a slot there too for IT, because we continue to have more IT and more computers and devices connected every day. And Chris and his group do a great job, but they get stretched pretty thin. So we're adding a couple IT, and we've over time, as we've increased technology in the system, we've done that year over year. I'll be glad. That's the highlights of everything. One thing that I think I wanted to mention, this is obviously budget's balanced against the revenue that we have. I think if you look down at the numbers, because of the substantial amount of dollars we've put into pay this year, we'll be against revenue, recurring revenue, about a $4.5 million deficit out, but we've financially planned for that, so we feel good that we'll be able to sustain that. Makes good decisions for employees and the classrooms and the schools, and we'll continue to do all the things like the technology we talked about. We've been doing that for years, where the principals work with Chris and spend dollars for technology at their school, get to kind of direct how that happens. We'll continue to do that as well.
Yeah, just a quick question on the personnel. I noticed you've got the social workers and school psychologists. Are any of those designated for certain schools, or are they do they rotate? I know in talking to some of the schools.
Katie added one. Katie, you added one there, so you could get your. Go ahead and answer. I remember how you did that.
Okay. Yes, the plan was when we started the crisis social work program, family throughout their whole school career with us. So that's where that puts us. So they're not assigned to a specific school, but they have a grouping of schools.
Okay, thank you. Then the last thing I'll mention is I noticed on the nursing page you had enrollment, and you had 30,600 for this year for the summer, and then for next year. And I've the luxury of my job, I have the ability to travel. I work with the FCA. I coach some little league around here. My team this year, I've got 3 kids from California that just moved in here, and I anticipate that number is going to continue to grow up. We have a lot of people moving to Sumner County. They don't want to go to the Franklin. They don't want to go to the Brentwood side. It's a little bit overgrown over there in some cases, and so they're looking for other areas. And I think what we've done with our schools, I think on the first or second page, one of the comments here is increase efficiency and effectiveness, and the next one, expand opportunities for students. I think everything that we've done around the campuses, the CTE programs, making sure we offer that, the AP course improvement, the number of courses, the honors level courses, the STEM school designations, the STEAM school designations, the middle college that we've opened. I think all of that is what's drawing folks to this county. And I think this budget, based on the initial look, obviously I think we'll look through the little pink binder in more detail over the next week or so. But I think this does a good job of continuing to position us as the leader from a school system standpoint, not just in Middle Tennessee, but in the state. And it's going to continue to draw more of these families into this area. So thank you.
I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Mr. Rickard was next, I think.
I realize this is not part of our budget, the SROs, but is that a possibility of having an SRO at every school?
So that's currently funded, and that's under the sheriff's budget. Of course, you know that. And I know that he is aggressively trying to fill those positions so we can have an SRO everywhere. So he's committed to that. The county's been committed to that. We're committed to that. He's in the same situation with labor that we are and everybody else is. So the sheriff is a great partner, and I'm 100% confident as soon as he can get them all filled, they will be.
Well, as Mr. Duncan mentioned about saving lives, school boards, we're saving lives in different directions. From the academic world, from the physical world with nurses, SROs, guidance, and I do especially know some SROs in our county have saved lives.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Gregory. Ms. Brown?
I have a suggestion too. It's one transfer. Is that what it's for
No,
transfer?
it's just, that's a transportation. So that's over in Andrew's world.
Well, but it should say transportation.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
actually, I just caught that and I'm updating as we speak, so.
Yeah, that trans
Yeah.
won't go
We'll,
through.
we'll spell it out, all right? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Ms. Hawkins?
Yes, in talking about the SROs, I was any further construction or addition to make our schools more secure.
Yeah, we went through that with the state and the grant, and we did a safety, and we do that every year anyway with our SROs. So Katie does that with the principals. We have a safety audit every year at the end of the school year that we file with the state. Back about 3 or 4 years ago, when we still had some schools without what we consider an airlock, where you have to go in and stop. You know, Gallatin High School was one of those, Indian Lake, Walk Ferry, I can go through the list. We went at that time and retrofitted that. So we've, I think, addressed all of those particular issues. And then obviously the dollars that we've spent over time with our camera system on campuses has been really beneficial. So, like at Gallatin High School, we may have 130 that are recording parking lot and inside the building all the time.
Okay.
So I think those things, along with SROs and other things, have really helped.
Okay. I have another question involving the unbudgeted fund balance. Help me remember, was last year's, was it 6 million that we had in the unbudgeted?
In the unbudgeted, we usually have 2 to 3.
Okay.
Last year it was 3. I think it was like
Okay.
3,
So that's
3 million
typically
100
what
or
we
something.
have.
Yes, typically about that.
Okay. I was just wondering, are we looking ahead, especially in my District 6, to preparation for the growth that I would expect would be in enrollment even this coming August?
Yeah, I think we're positioned fine for now. We get the schools open, and of course it gives us some opportunity to, if we had to down the road, to rezone. I think your next biggest thing as far as actually looking into the window of time, as Gallatin continues to grow, and I've had a conversation with Mayor Brown about this, but as Gallatin continues to grow, we're going to have to make some decisions about where the next campus will be located in the proximity of Gallatin, probably closer to the city limits or somewhere close. And that will be the next big thing that we have to address. But I think that's still several years down the road. But it may not be several years before we start.
Considering the number of individual structures going in right now, I would think we're going to have thousands in the fall, are we not?
No, I wouldn't think so. I would be stunned if we do. I think we'll be closer to our normal growth curve, which is kind of what we've planned for. But I could be wrong. I can always be surprised.
I'm just looking at what the city, when I went and looked at the proposed buildings in this area, in the city limits, is just astounding.
Yeah.
Everywhere I look, apartments, condominiums, and I know that they're going to have a lot of families with.
Yeah, when we looked back, several years ago, and I think we gave you guys that data at that time of how we try to keep up and collect the number of approved. Doesn't necessarily mean they're active, but approved residential lots or buildings. Obviously, right around Gallatin back to Big Station, obviously is where the vast majority of those were. And then, of course, what we're doing in White House right now is to try to accommodate three larger developments that are happening very close proximity to White House High School and H.B. Williams.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Ms. Hawkins. Ms. Andrews?
Couple of things I know we're gonna get asked about,
Yep.
that weren't on here. School supplies, are we providing those again this year?
We are, and I think I gypped you guys. If you look back at this slide, if you see medical increase, I kind of went all through the staffing because that's the vast majority of the budget this year, changes in pay and staffing. Medical increase is pretty typical for us, around 5%, which the employees pay 20% of that, and the district pays the other 80%. So it's a pretty standard run for us as far as medical increases. We haven't seen major change in that over time. It's just kind of steady as you go. Diesel and gas, obviously, we've amended money into those lines this year as diesel and gas prices have increased steadily throughout the year. So we tried to look and see if that continues for an entire year at $5 a gallon, then what would that look like? Utilities and operational costs, that's a little bit of inflationary increase on current campuses, and then adding the new campus is the vast majority of that $779. Trustee commission, we pay the trustee. It's a formula. What they collect and receipt, they get a percentage of that. So we'll have to book more money for that expenditure. Instructional supplies. Those are the supplies that we typically will purchase for the past several years for K-8 students and families. You know, we've done that. We've made some changes to that, so principals have and teachers have more flexibility in what they order. Jamie and her team have done a fabulous job with that. I think it's gotten better every year. This year we had two things happening. One, that $350,000 is new money. It's going to cost $350,000 more. Let me tell you why. Number one, things cost more on that list. Two, feedback from the teachers, they did not like the binders we were buying. They said they were cheap.
They were.
They didn't like them. But we have the best pencils in the world. Ticonderoga is the only pencil you can't even write if you don't use one. Long story short, that's a cost increase on inflation, but it's also a change that was fairly pricey to get the binders that the teachers wanted in the supply list. And then that's pretty much it. I mentioned the other stuff. TCR is rate adjustment. That is something they send us every year, and so it goes up and down. We've been overfunding that for a little bit, so we're going a little bit less money this coming year.
But to clarify on that retirement specifically, none of that's coming from your board members.
No.
Okay.
One thing on medical that has nothing to do with an increase, but I do want to mention this to you guys. The only thing some of you remember from years ago, before we were on our own insurance trust here, and we were at the county, and we had two different things. We had the you guys remember this, I know. We had teachers, certified staff on the state insurance, the classified on the county. You remember that? Mm-hmm. And we went through that. So it was always a big concern inside the system. We changed away from that. And so now all of our employees, certified and classified, are on our side. They all have the same insurance, right? It's all the same plan. Everybody's treated the same until you retire. And then when you retire, the only thing that wasn't aligned, retiree rates on classified were a little bit higher than certified. And so we're, Ms. Brown and I are correcting that this year. So it will be aligned completely. So when you retire, the rates that you get as a retiree for certified and classified will match. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. We're straightening that up.
And then also per pupil amount, is that staying the same as far as what we have been spending? I know, originally back years ago it was like $13 a student.
We've increased it to 75-30. Yeah, okay. It's the same. So like the per pupil that we give out to principals, that we've continually marched up, the district device fund, all of those things stay consistent. We're not taking any of those away. We're continuing to do and fund those things. This is just things that would be new are changes in the expenditure side.
Yeah, I've just got one other question after Ms. Andrews. She asked about the, providing the supplies and materials to teach or to our students again. And it's one of those little things that we sometimes talk about, not just in the amount that you spend on school supplies, but just the pressure of having to go fight the crowds on a Saturday or Friday or whenever it is to go and get the stuff. But the one thing I wanted to ask, and this, I know this isn't necessarily related to the budget summary that you're showing here. When we approve the budget, we also vote on the nutrition budget, which is separate and funded by the state through different resources, I believe. So we know that, and they help set the price for lunches and all that kind of stuff. But am I right that I think it's the state removed us, or they've dropped the free lunch that's been provided the last couple of years? I think in our counties for students, every student got lunch provided to them at no cost. I know there was a refund on that, but is that going away this next school year?
Yeah, so that started with the pandemic.
Yes.
And we basically, part of the funding that the federal government sent through the National School Lunch Act, which is what everyone bases their school cafeteria program on. They basically said everyone that you ask for reimbursement, we're going to pay for everyone's meal. So we've had that now for a couple of years. We anticipate that will go away. We have not been notified that it will be renewed. But we were in the same situation last year, and then Congress renewed it, at the last minute. So, Mr. Daniels, I don't know what will happen. We're anticipating, just like last year, that it won't be renewed. We have no indication to think that they would, but they could.
Okay. And again, I'm not arguing the merits pro-con of that. I know a lot of people have benefited from that, but when we're looking at the budget and we're talking about instructional supplies, if a student was paying for lunch every day at $3 a day for 180 days, that's $550. So if you've got 2 kids, 3 kids, you're looking at an extra $1,500 in expenses in some cases during the course of the year. So I do think that some of the the little things like helping out with school supplies make a difference when you add things like that into the equation as well. So.
And we will bring obviously the school nutrition budget. For us, it's a revenue neutral budget, but Ms. Brown and Andy met with Dawn, and right now, I think several years ago, we always try to keep lunch prices the lowest we can, and we're anticipating to try to do that again. The change in inflation cost of food has driven up the reimbursement that the feds give you. This was what happened years ago. I know Mr. Wise and I talked about this when it occurred. And they will only let you be less than their expenditure, their reimbursement, by so much. Does that make sense? So if they're going to give you $4 a meal, they're not going to let you charge $2. Does that make sense? They're just not going to. You have to be fairly aligned with what they're going to reimburse. So we're looking at that. Right now we're trying to make sure that all of our cafeteria staff obviously are included in the pay raises that are the same for everyone. So they'll be included in that. But we'll get you that budget next week.
Do you know when we might know whether that's being renewed or not being renewed?
It's Congress. I don't know.
So day before school starts.
I'll be honest with you, I'd hate to say.
Sometime
I'm guessing a lot of stuff, but I'm going to leave that one alone. I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Ms. Bachman, did you have something?
Well, thank you. Mr. Daniels actually asked the question I was going to check about the meals, the free meals for the children. But I guess we just have to wait and see.
Yep.
I think this is a good budget so far. We've had a lot of input and a lot of questions, and appreciate all your appreciate. I think you did, and Amanda, great job. I know it takes all of you to try to pull this together.
Yeah, she does a fabulous job.
Yeah, so we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Bachman. Is that all on the budget? All right. Seeing that that's all, then the next item on the agenda is discussion regarding revision to policy 4.301, interscholastic athletics prior to second reading.
This is the discussion that we had. Mike, come on up. This is a discussion we had at the last meeting, and I said, hey, we'll get Mr. Brown up here, and we'll talk about it as long as y'all want to. At the end of the day, this deals with homeschool, right, Mike?
Yes.
Homeschool athletics, how we've been interpreting the policy, what the policy says, what TSSAA says, and then what we believe it is fair and right considering how we've been implementing the policy since we started allowing homeschool athletes to participate. All right, Mike, take it over.
All right, this is basically just a change in policy to catch us up with TSSAA changes as the state law in out of zone stuff, and make policy the same as what we're practicing, okay, with those things. First part was the TSSAA did away with the date that you had to report to the central office, okay? It used to be August 1st. The basic problem there was spring sport kids sometimes didn't decide to play until later in the year, and then they were just out of luck because they didn't do their due diligence on the front end. So basically, with the changes with TSSAA and those dates, what we've put into place, and I've talked to my ADs about, is that we won't let a homeschool student practice until they have all their paperwork to the AD, okay? So that kind of satisfies all the dates and all of our paperwork. The other thing is we've been allowing our students for a variety of reasons to play, to try out at the schools in the school zone that they live, okay? And there are several reasons for that. It's, you know, if you really want to stack a team, then just, you know, move to Sumner County. I'll go back to the same school, which we headed off a few years ago and kind of started down this path. TSSAA does say, still says district. Most of the larger districts, though, have gone to something like this. Also, with the state law changing with out of zones and the lotteries and things like that, even our regular students are pretty much in zone now. And so it doesn't make sense to let homeschool students be allowed to do something that our other students aren't. So they're allowed to try out at their zone to school, which is what we've been doing. We've probably had one or two kind of slide through the cracks, but when I took this job 5 years ago, we probably had a dozen, maybe 15. And then now we're probably looking at 4 dozen. So it's increased. We have, you know, I've taken calls with parents say, hey, we've moved in from out of state and we're homeschooling our kids. What are the rules? And then the other thing is we had a number of students obviously go to homeschool when during the pandemic, and some never returned, but they still wanted to play ball. So we kind of remedied that with the policy. And with TSSAA, you can't be less restrictive in your policy, but you can be more restrictive. So by us saying we're going to let you play, but we're going to let you play at your zone school, that's us being a little bit more restrictive, but it also brings us in line with what our day students at all our schools are faced with in terms of out of zones and lottery and stuff now. So really, it just brings us into line with the changes at TSSAA, the changes in the lottery and out of zone, and the practices that we've developed over the past few years. Does that make any sense? It makes perfect sense to me. Does it make sense out loud?
Oh, run that by me again. They try out at their home school.
Yes.
Do they have to stay there?
Unless they move. Yes.
Unless they move?
Yes.
Okay.
We would make them subject to the same type of transfers. In other words, if a student lived in Portland and they moved to Hendersonville,
Right.
okay, then their zone to school would change, and we would change that. We would change their home school to wherever they live.
But if they live in Portland, they can't go to Hendersonville.
Right.
Sorry, Mr. Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory.
Right. And I did change and streamline the paperwork with my athletic directors so that they have to go through them. We had a few things and we had a few too many fingers in the pie. So we've streamlined it just down to them. So before they practice, they have to see the athletic director at each school and they have the proper paperwork. They can check their zones. We're asking that they provide 2 proofs of residence. Number 1, are they in the county? Number 2, are they in the school zone? And that's exactly what we do at registration with any student. So we're not asking them to do anything that we don't ask our normal day students to do.
You do a great job.
Well, I don't know about that, but
I bet he's the most underpaid person in the county. That's okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Mr. Daniels?
Yeah, I've just got a couple questions. This applies to high school, correct? TSSAA.
High school and middle school.
So it applies to middle school as well?
Yes.
So we had some individuals here at our last meeting, cross-country coaches, for example, that were concerned about how it might affect some of their students that might not be zoned in their area. If we were to approve this policy, then obviously those students that aren't in their zone would not be able to participate with those teams, correct? Is that?
I would think that my thought would be that you would want to, because they have an athletic record, anyone that's currently playing that's homeschooled, right? You would grandfather them in because
Okay.
they're already, their clock started wherever they're at, right, Mike?
They would have some TSSAA eligibility issues. But like I said, we had a few too many fingers in the pie, and we have had a few that have kind of slipped through the cracks.
And
Not many.
But my point is, if they're currently playing and have started their clock,
Yes.
then the TSSAA policy will allow us to continue letting them play there.
Yes.
So my point is, we're not out in this policy clarification to punish students that are currently playing out of school. Does that make sense? We're just trying to say if any start,
Right.
they
Well,
have to play in their zone school.
And the reason I was asking is, at first I was thinking, well, maybe if they, cross country was the example that I think some of the coaches brought before us, and my thought was, what if you allow some students at some of those sports to be able to participate if they're homeschool students, but then that opens the door if they're going here for this, then maybe they step in and say, I'm going to run cross country, but then they end up on the football team or the basketball team or whatever that is, and I could see how that could cause a domino effect. So I'm trying to think through as we go through this. Is there a way to help them with this policy? And I don't see one right now outside of what you just discussed. But I just want to make sure that I've thought through some of the concerns that they brought up as we're discussing this. So, and I know you've thought through this and consider all that, and you're
Yes.
in their day to day, and you've had the conversations, and you have probably a better idea of what's going on within the schools and sports and homeschool students as well. So I trust your judgment on this. I just wanted to kind of ask. So
Right. And like I say, I won't tell you that we haven't had a few come through the cracks, even though we're telling them to go to zone schools. We probably have a few, not very many though, not very many. And of course, when I took this job, we had them all over the place, and the ones that were wherever they were, we let them finish. And that's the ones that do get through, it's hard to make them change, and it'll affect their eligibility. But if they're in a middle school now, and that when they change to a different school, then yes, they can go to their zoned high school because they don't have an athletic background at that point in the high school.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Ms. Andrews?
Okay, I'm gonna try to wrap my head around this because I do feel like it's a different monster. This homeschool policy, I feel like it is compared to what our typical even eligibility. So correct me if I'm wrong, that I've been told that even if they're a homeschool student
Yes.
and they're playing a sport, homeschool,
Yep.
and say they're a freshman, say their sophomore year, they decide to go to their zoned school. Does that affect, I've been told that may affect their eligibility even if they're going from homeschool to regular school, even if
Yes.
it's within their zone.
Yes, and that's not our policy. That's
Correct.
That's TSSAA eligibility. They become a transfer student at that point.
At that point, okay. How many current homeschool students do we have playing athletics?
Oh, goodness.
Approximately, I would
is it
say
a handful? Is it closer to 100?
it's probably in the middle. It's probably around probably around the 40 to 50 range.
Okay.
Like I say, when I first took over, it was probably 12 or 15,
Okay.
but now it's probably 40 or 50.
Okay. are we seeing that number grow over the year? Like, have we, I mean, obviously since you took over, you said it has, but like, I guess in light of COVID and so forth and people moving in, is this becoming exponentially more? You know,
No,
like, I guess maybe did we add one a year? Are we now adding 10? Or, yeah, type. Or,
I'm going to give you a guess. We're probably adding 4 to 6
okay.
a year, and a lot of them are those two sources. It's kids that just have not come back, and then those that are moving in. We don't have a great deal of there's not a lot of the homeschool umbrella organizations, but as they pop up, then you're going to, every time one of those pops up, then you get 4 or 5 kids from those organizations.
Okay. The one issue that I've heard from parents specifically of students who are participating in a sport that is not currently at their zone school is because they had contacted their zone school and did not get a response. Or they contacted their zone school and were told, we don't accept homeschool students. I know that's communication probably that we need to handle within the system, but specifically if we're going to adopt this policy, I feel like that needs to go out more, and coaches need to realize you've got to return the phone call. Like, you've got to call them back. I mean, they have that option to do that, and they have the opportunity to try out.
Well, the one instance that I've had my attention brought to was the lack of communication, and on a couple of different levels. And then I met with the administration and the parent and the student, and we worked that out.
Okay. And then just for clarification, I guess we would just put it as part of the motion, if we were to adopt this, as it states, that we would grandfather in, but the grandfathering in is only through, like, if they're currently right now doing TMSAA, it's through their 8th grade year. If they're TSSAA, it would be 9 through 12.
Through the school that they're currently at. When they have to change schools,
They have to go to their zone school.
yeah, they need to go to their zone schools.
Okay.
But I think you could put that in motion when it's time to do it.
Okay. Sorry, just looking to the and just to clarify, so on this policy too, it says the intent to homeschool form has to be completed and turned into either the principal or the athletic director. Do we need to clarify that as to, like, streamline that so that?
Well, I've told my athletic directors it needs to come to them, but I mean,
Do we need to say and, or should we just change it to athletic? Just because I want to rule out any confusion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so that everybody's on the same page, because what happens with us having social media is this mama's going to tell that mama, no, you got to turn it into athletic director, but that school says, no, you turn it into the principal.
Yeah.
Where in our policy it says either or.
And I don't want to cause Mike to have more paperwork, but I think when we did this originally, I'm almost certain originally that we had, of course it was new, we didn't have any, right? And so I think we originally had them send that to me, because at that time we didn't have Mike.
it actually went to attendance.
Attendance, okay.
It went to attendance and then to you.
What I would prefer to see is for us to put in the policy that it goes to the school's athletic director as well as the district athletic director. I'd like to see a list compiled so I knew how many were at Beach and how many at Hendersonville.
Okay.
I would clear it up that way.
Yeah.
And if the school AD gets it, they can compile a list and say, we have these 5, these are their names, and this is their grades, and they're playing these sports at Beach High School. And then we kind of know what we're dealing with, if that's okay.
Yes, and one of the reasons they kind of fell through the cracks is what the athletic directors were taking care of eligibility. Homeschool student came up, we want to play ball, that's fine. Have you done intensive homeschool? You have to do that at the attendance office at the central office. They had to physically come up here and get the papers and fill them out. Okay, and so all they would call, have they filled them out? Yes, we have them. We have them on our homeschool rolls. That was it. And then when we started trying to go to zones, the only place that they're required to have an address is on that intent form. Well, now the intent form can be filled out at the school, and then it is in turn, when it's done, faxed or emailed to the attendance office. So it's one-stop shop now, and then the athletic director has all the information they need. Intent to homeschool, and which has an address on it, 2 proofs of residence, the information they need for TSSAA, and the no harm letter for TSSAA. So instead of it being spread out over 2 or 3 people, it's one person.
And I know that may sound like semantics just to ask for that to be clarified, but I just feel like for it to be consistent across in every school, that this is their requirement, and this is who you go to, this is who takes care of it, and then they. So
yeah.
I think if we can clarify that, I think that would, just because, like I said, I feel like there is confusion when it comes to homeschool anyways, and then there are some extra provisions that they do, and then like I said, that the eligibility provision of being homeschooled and then returning, that's not something. But I think to have that to clarify, and there is a contact person that knows all their answers.
Should be their athletic directors.
Correct. So if we can put that information.
And they've been instructed to tell their coaches that if a homeschooled student shows up to practice or to an organizational meeting or whatever, to immediately tell them, go as soon as you're cleared through the athletic director, then you're allowed to try out.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Mr. Daniels.
Yeah, I had one comment I wanted to say. I think adding that in might help with communication, because now it's not, I go to a coach or a principal who may or may not be connected to the team. Instead, I'm going to an AD that can help steer them to the right person, the coaches, make sure maybe that process works a little bit better. But I did want to try to clarify one thing. When we were having the conversation, you'd mentioned that, if they're zoned at a current school, we can just grandfather them in. I just want to make sure that when we say that we're talking about homeschool students.
That's right.
Yes. Because there's, we had a conversation with the new campus opening up, and outside of seniors with the new campus, you go to where you're zoned unless you got in through the lottery. And so the only students we're talking about are the 40 or 50 current homeschool students that may be grandfathered in based on their current school, and if they're middle school and going to high school, then they got to move. We're not talking about grandfathering in any, because I could see some sophomores at some of our schools say, well, I heard them say that I'm grandfathered in, so I don't have to go. That doesn't work with the TSSAA, I believe. And so I just want to make sure, for a clarification point, that we're talking about homeschool students, not
only
every athlete
only
in our system playing for all the schools. So.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's all in the homeschool.
And I can contact the ADs and get a list of what we're talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Anybody else on this subject? Mr.
How did kindergarten registration go throughout the county? I mean, I guess it went well, but did we have increases, decreases, or?
Mr. Gregory, we're talking about homeschool athletics.
Oh, I thought you were through with that.
No, we weren't through. We got another agenda item.
Well, come back to me.
Okay, all right. Anybody else on the discussion of the interscholastic athletics prior to second reading? Anybody on that? I do have one thing I would like to say on it. I was here when we put that policy into place. We didn't have a policy for homeschool people. And I think at the time, the board and the administration at the time did not want it. Through some strong advocating and quoting some stats, such as homeschool people, such as President Woodrow Wilson was homeschooled, and who would not like to have Tim Tebow's stats on your, anyway, long story short, we got it through. But it in my recollection, it was the intent that you went to your zone school.
Yes.
It wasn't meant for, somebody station camp says, well, I like Hendersonville better, they could run to different places. They had to go for where they were zoned. So I think we're just clearing that up really.
Right. But when it says district, some of them took that literally and they were going wherever they wanted, and 3 or 4 of them, actually 5 tried to go to one school and stack one team, and none of them lived in the same zone. So that's really where the zone part started. And that's the desire, but it wasn't, it is worded that way now.
Okay, anybody else? All right, seeing none, thank you, Ms. Brown. Next item on the agenda is discussion regarding the naming of Beach High School baseball press box. Who is that? Miss Ann?
Yes, so, we've got communication from, Mr. Powell. I'll just read it so that y'all, so everybody is on the same page. I was approached by several of our senior parents that would like to dedicate the press box in honor of Rob and Marion Wheeler. Rob has been involved with Beach High School since the early 2000s and has always been an avid supporter of athletes and teams. Rob started calling the games for our baseball team on Facebook several years ago, and Marion, his wife, joined him shortly after, and the two have been doing this together for years. This couple, the Wheelers, have become a mainstay with the program, traveling at their own expense to call the games for our families and others that cannot make it out to the ballparks. The Wheelers are more than deserving of this honor, and I thank you for approving this dedication to Rob and Marion. I'll just add a personal comment on there is that they do a great job. They don't just, though, call the games for baseball. They also do a great job broadcasting all of the Beach High School basketball games. And they have great commentary, very respectful. Just they do a great job. They represent Sumner County well. They represent Beach High School well. And so I do think specifically with the, I think it did start with baseball and they moved into basketball season. But especially, you know, some of those teams travel a distance. So to be able to have real time watching the games and support has been great for that. So I think it is a deserving honor and hope that y'all will support it.
Thank you, Ms. Andrews. Ms. Brown?
I would like to know, has the administration agreed?
I'm sorry?
The administration at the school, have they agreed?
Have they agreed to it?
Yes.
They're the ones that
That's
started.
what sent me.
Oh, okay.
They're the ones that did that.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Anyone else?
May I ask that question?
Just a minute. Let's finish this. We're not finished on this yet because I had something I'd like to say. Just through past experience, I don't mean to be negative, but it's hard for me to support something to put somebody's name across that's still alive. I think it gives them a very, very unfair advantage if they ever decide to run for office, where people can drive by and say, well, there's a big, you know, look at that, I'll vote for that guy because, you know, and we actually lack one vote having, it passed one vote and went to the study session, we didn't vote on it a second time to ban that completely. So that's just something I consider. I know him. You know, they are great people. They've done a great job. I don't have anything against them personally, but I think when you do that, it gives them a very, very unfair advantage if they ever decide to run for office, and they have before, and they could again. So, anybody else on that subject? Ms. Brown?
Well, then why do we have Short? Coach Short. Jerry Free.
I think in the past, I don't think we'll get into all of that.
No,
But I'm
no.
saying,
Stuff all over the county.
we have.
Yeah,
We just need to address the ones in front of us.
I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah.
So, anyway, anything else on that? All right, Mr. Gregory.
I guess it went well. But are the numbers up, down, even?
I'm gonna have to get those numbers for you later this week, Mr. Gregory. I don't have that in front of me, but I've contacted my team and we'll find out.
Well, I've heard from some schools, not how many elementaries we have, 20,
26, yes, sir.
26.
Mhm.
I've heard of some, and some are down, some are way up.
Mhm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Seeing nothing else come before the board, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.